In a rich, bountiful land in southern China, an ancient song echoes over this ancient city. Its beautiful, exquisite gardens rustle in the wind. The Chinese people believe it as heaven on earth. Discover China as we unlock the gates to Suzhou Gardens. For thousands of years, many Chinese have dreamed of living here. Water quietly flows beneath the picturesque bridges into the twisting canals that runs through the city. People living along the river can hear songs sung by the people sailing the passing boats. A beautiful woman in a striking dress is embroidering, accompanied by enchanting music. Her slender fingers move gracefully along the silk, sewing delicate designs onto the fabric. This is a romantic place. With their elegant taste and sense for beauty, ancient Chinese scholars composed this music and built these beautiful gardens. The picturesque flowing rivers and arching bridges, the beautiful gardens and houses they built inspired them to even greater artistic achievements. They took pleasure in the quiet gardens in the midst of the noisy city by drawing landscape paintings or composing poems or music. What they enjoyed most was listening to kunchu, one of the most enchanting forms of Chinese opera. This is Suzhou, a place regarded by many Chinese as heaven on earth. They believe that for a place to be considered a paradise, it must have both kunchu opera and gardens. Suzhou is an ancient city with more than 2,500 years of history. The gardens in the city first took shape in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. Over the course of more than 1,000 years, the number of gardens has risen to over 500. Garden construction had reached a peak that was characterized by a unique style. Today, the influences of southern China's classical styles are still felt in the gardens strewn all over the city. During the Northern Song Dynasty, a poet named Su Shunqing was looking for a place where he could live in seclusion. He stumbled upon a quiet pond in the southern parts of Suzhou. It did not share the same luxurious features found at a royal garden. It was a simple, natural garden. The poet had found his spiritual home. He purchased the piece of land for 40,000 taels and began building a home for himself. Su named his garden Canglong Ting, the Azure Wave Pavilion. The characters Canglong came from a famous Chinese poem titled The Verses of Chu. When politics were corrupt, a man would rather leave his government job and live like a hermit in the mountains, letting the pure azure waves cleanse his soul. This is the Azure Wave Pavilion. The entire garden is named after Su's creation. In those days, people came from afar bearing special gifts. They would climb up to the pavilion where they would share a cup of tea and play chess. They would discuss world affairs while enjoying the beautiful views as time flew by. For over 1,000 years, Suzhou has been one of the richest cities in China. With its bountiful natural resources and rich cultural heritage, Suzhou helped produce generations of talented artists and scholars. Many of the garden owners in Suzhou were retired Chinese officials, disillusioned from their experience in the turbulent imperial court. Frustrated and disappointed, they chose Suzhou as a retirement destination. Private gardens were built one after the other. Their hearts and souls found refuge in these scenic gardens. Their former political ambitions turned into a passion for music, seeking respite from the strained world. In the early Ming Dynasty, two disgruntled scholars met by chance. That acquaintance left the garden city with a curious legend. Suzhou native Wei Liangfu was disheartened at his failing music studies when he happened to hear a young man singing. He was deeply impressed and touched. The young man was Zhang Yeteng. Wei was deeply moved by his singing. Soon after, the two began studying and enjoying music together. They eventually became close friends. In the following decade, Wei studied music with great devotion. He developed a new method of singing. It was so subtle and smooth, it was named Shui Mo Qiang, water-polished music. Eastern aesthetics stress natural blending in with the scenery. The long and winding corridors, coupled with a deep and shaded courtyard and soothing water-polished music, would make even the most distraught court officials feel like they are in paradise. Chinese opera and gardening are very much alike. A garden can be as smooth and as gentle as a song. In the early 15th century, Suzhou native and official Wang Shanchen returned to his hometown. He built another famous garden, Zhou Jianyuan, the humble administrator's garden. This boat-like structure, perched serenely on the water, is a unique Chinese architectural structure. Its name, Shangzhou, means the fragrant land. Wang has created in his garden scenes of the four seasons on the water. He borrowed many of his ideas from Kunchu opera. On top of the structure sits a guqin, China's venerable seven-string instrument. The views from the garden are symbolic to the beauty of nature the humble official saw in his mind's eye. Away from the vanity of politics, Wang sought the pleasures of life in his home garden. He invited Wen Zhengming, southern China's most prominent painter at that time, to design the layout of his garden. Relying on his artistic training, Wen Zhengming drew out a general outline. The humble administrator's garden took 10 years to complete under Wen's supervision. Unfortunately, Wang passed away soon after the garden was completed, leaving behind a beautiful garden and stories. It is said that the Hall of 36 Mandarin ducks in the western part of the garden was Wang's favorite spot. This is where Wang used to watch and enjoy Kunchu opera together with his old friends. As time flies by, the joys and sorrows of Kunchu opera's gentle tones have long permeated through the mountain rocks and crevices. The shape of this rock resembles a high mountain peak shrouded by clouds. It is literally called Guangyunfeng, the cloud-crowned peak. Gathering rocks that resemble mountains is a key technique applied in Suzhou Gardens. This huge rock sculpture resembles real natural mountains. It is said to be a masterpiece by one of China's most famous artists of that time. When creating a rock sculpture, ancient Chinese scholars were mindful, leaving spaces between some rocks. Like a musical pause, these spaces and holes are thought-provoking. Selecting the rocks, they did not care about the rigidity or thickness, but more about the shape and whether it resembled anything. They sometimes exaggerated the changes in the mountain shape to create a more natural look. The people of Suzhou have a saying: a beautiful garden is like a kunchu play, and kunchu is like a beautiful garden. When people walk through the picturesque scenery, the noise and bustle of the city are suddenly drowned out in this innocent-looking garden. The famous Kunchu story of the Peony Pavilion takes place in one of those gardens. It tells the story of a young couple longing for love. Girls were not allowed to meet with strangers. They were confined to their courtyards. When the heroine saw her family's garden for the first time, she became deeply saddened. Isolated from the outside world and surrounded by high walls, how could she meet her one true love? All she could do was dream, a dream about a young scholar. The young girl, deprived of love, soon died of a broken heart. Her dreams of the young scholar were torn away from her. Life is but a play. Its acts reveal the story and lead to its ultimate end. When the two loves could not meet in real life, a dream became their last resort. The story of the Peony Pavilion has been told in China for centuries. The strong passion expressed by this play represented the longing for love, unhindered by the norms of society. From the dream world back to real life. Hailing from northern China, a couple in love decided to move to Suzhou. After sharing many hardships living up north, they left their hometown and chose to live a secluded life. They avoided society within their high walls and worked in the garden every day, enjoying their peace and comfort. They were used to the roaring sounds of their hometown. When they were building their garden, they built a tower overlooking a river bend. They named it Tinglu Tower, from which they could listen to the sounds of rowing. The husband's study was built alongside that tower, facing each other. The two buildings are adjoined from the inside. Whenever they heard the sound of the skulls from outside, the couple was always reminded of their hometown. People can live far away from their hometown, but their memories follow them wherever they may roam. Tongli, a town near Suzhou, is a typical southern Chinatown. When Tongli native Ren Lanxian, a high-ranking official of the Qing court, grew weary of the corruption running rampant in the government, he retired to his hometown. He spent the rest of his life building Tui Su Yuan, the garden of retreat and reflection. A stone boat stands in the midst of Tui Su Yuan. It's called Nao Hong Yi Ge, and it takes its shape after a real sailing boat. Historically, boats were major means of transportation in southern China. A stone boat in a garden reminded its owners of their past lives. Ren named his garden Tui Si to show his willingness to reflect on his shortcomings, even though he had retired from the imperial court. By doing so, he could improve himself and seek the true meaning of life. Imagine, at the bow of the stone boat, a beautiful girl playing her flute while a young man joins her in song. For thousands of years, these love stories, accompanied by the touching music of Kunqiu opera, mark the special nature of southern China and the magic behind the Suzhou Gardens.